Hey guys, how's it going? Frank here from Tithely, coming to you with another live episode of Modern Church Leader, where we talk with pastors and church leaders from really all over the world about how they're doing church, how they're changing lives in their local community, how they're doing church during the pandemic, COVID-19, and even how we're doing church into this holiday season. So really excited about today's guest. Without further ado, let me bring him in. Pastor Richardo, how's it going this morning?
I'm great. How are you, Frank?
I'm doing great. Always good. We are in December, so it's December 1st, and the holidays are in full swing around the Berry House. How about you guys?
The same here. We had an amazing Thanksgiving, and as you and I have already discussed, elves are on the shelf, and so we're fully embracing the
If
Christmas
the
Eve.
kids are watching, we don't want to give away what's going on here. Okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
We I mean, I don't know how far to go on that, but we got this little kit this year because like getting creative with Elf on the Shelf is like a whole thing, right? And you like every night you're like, oh gosh, I got to move the thing. So like we got a kit and we got this whole plan. It's awesome. My wife found it. So we're set this year.
Love it. Love it.
So you guys had a good Thanksgiving?
An amazing Thanksgiving. Both sides of our family, my wife and I, are both here in the Athens area, and so we were able to do that in a safe way.
Love that.
And pray that you and all those who are with us today had an amazing Thanksgiving as well, even in the midst of this unusual time.
Even in the crazy. Yeah, we had my wife's parents over, my brother, his wife came over. So we kept it pretty small this year and lots of outdoors. But we ate and had pumpkin pie for days. So
Wow.
my father-in-law likes to eat the pumpkin pie for breakfast. So that's how he rolls.
I think he deserves that pass during the holidays.
Totally. Well, Pastor Richardo, man, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get into ministry? I know you started a conference. How did you get into starting a conference? What's your journey been like?
Wow. Well, first, again, Frank, thank you for this opportunity to share today. We're grateful for the amazing connection that God has made. So I've been in ministry now a little over 16 years. Been in pastoral ministry a little bit over 8 years now. And I serve as pastor of the Brown Chapel Baptist Church in Bishop, Georgia. I'm sure most of the viewers today have never heard of Bishop.
Yeah, tell us all where it's at. Give us the geography lesson real quick.
Bishop, Georgia is about 15 minutes outside of Athens, Georgia. And if you don't know where Athens, Georgia is, it is the home of the Georgia Bulldogs, the University of Georgia, and we have not won a championship since 1980. Don't get me started on that, but that's a whole other conversation for another live.
Hey, you brought it up. It must be a sore spot.
It is. It's just a little bit, but if you're not familiar with Athens, we're about an hour and 15 away from Atlanta, Georgia. And so I pastor in what some would categorize as a rural context. And so when we arrived 8 years ago, small family church, you could not find us on a Google search, on Google Maps. And so we did a lot of legwork to make sure that was done, so we will be visible to prepare ourselves where we didn't know we needed to be 8 years ago. But also the name of our church was misspelled, so we had to correct that different places.
Like misspelled on the internet?
It was misspelled on the internet. And so
okay, I was like, not like on the building or anything, I hope.
We were not that bad off, trust me. but yeah, on the internet. And so just navigating the nuances. I came from a more, more urban, heart of the community context of ministry. I was a young adult and college minister prior to assuming the pastorate. And so having to learn a lot of those nuances were key. But in the process of that, probably about 2 or 3 years in, my wife and I were home. I had a frustrated Sunday. And after just kind of using her as the sounding board, She said that there's this concept you've had in your head for years that you've got to get out of your head. And so she made a list of people for me to contact that were both in our church and in our community, and said, tell them to meet you at Panera Bread at 3 o'clock. And so I reached out to them. They all met me. And I shared the vision of this conference that we're going to talk about today. And they said, Pastor, that's a phenomenal idea. When do you want to do it? I said, in 60 days. And so 2 years ago, we had some brave souls that joined me on a journey to plan our first conference in 2019. And now we're gearing up for our third year. And we're super excited about all that we're going to be able to offer to the local church.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that. Hey, let's do this. We're going to do it in 60 days. Because I think just a lot of people get stuck and don't take action. Like they don't move. They don't go do whatever it is in their head or on their heart. Like they just don't take action. And so that thing just sits around for, 20 years later, you're like, oh, I wish I would have done that. And taking action, sets you apart in a lot of ways, right? You went off and did it. And now this thing exists, the Classic City Conference. And it's in Athens, right?
It is in Athens. And so, you mentioned that is a hurdle even for me in my own shoring up areas of leadership for myself, that I needed to take that leap. And so I often say my wife is the clearest voice of God I hear, even when I don't want to hear it. So
I can relate.
Yeah, there it is. And so that thrust me into it. But the vision for it really came from not just the frustration I experienced, but I've always believed in professional development. And so every year I made it I made it a part of my custom to partake in conferences all over. My wife and I would set aside, budgets for her career, for mine, for professional development. And as I was going to conferences, pretty frequently, maybe at least two or three a year, a lot of my colleagues were not traveling as much as I was able to, because they were bivocational in and around this community. And so they would often ask me to bring materials back to them. And so a mentor of mine said, man, what would it look like if you were to design something in the community that would give them access to the same resources? And so we really designed the conference to strengthen the local church, which in turn strengthens our local communities, and to really bring resources and to lay them at the feet of the pastors and leaders who will be a part of our conference. And so in essence, I wanted to help a lot of pastors like me. And then it shifted from being a pastor's conference to a church leaders conference, when a lot of those pastors went back to their pastoral contexts and they said, we got a lot of great material, but our people just aren't ready for the shifts that need to happen. And so we said, okay, there are a lot of great conferences for pastors. There are a lot of great preaching conferences, even though you're going to get great preaching at this one too. But we want to be a conference for church leaders that will provide resources and relationships to help build their local church. And so that's how we even connected with you, because Tithely is going to be one of those amazing resources that we'll be able to literally lay at the feet of the pastors who will be with us.
Yeah. I love that. We're excited, and it's going to be fun because conferences during COVID is going to be interesting. But let's jump back a little bit to the why. And you kind of described it, but what were you frustrated with, or what were you running into that you were like, oh, because that to me sounds like something needed to change. There was something you wanted to see be different about your church and its impact in your community,
right?
That just wasn't happening, or something wasn't working. What was that? What was the thing that you were kind of like, man, I need to see something change? And then it led to this whole conference inspiring other churches to change.
Phenomenal question, man. So to try to put it as succinctly as I can, it was the culture, of the church. This church is now 122 years old.
Wow.
And at my time of arrival, I was the youngest pastor in the church's history. And so you can imagine.
I mean, you're only like 28, so you must have been like.
Let's go with that. How about that? No, seriously, I was 28 when I got here. And so
when you got there, okay, wow.
Right on the dot. I was 28 years old. And so that in and of itself presented some challenges. Not because I don't think anybody necessarily disliked me, but there was a little bit of let's help him along because this is his first church, and
naturally,
we got a great young guy, but let's he's gonna need some help in these areas. Let's try to pastor him as he pastors us. Right. So it was a little bit of that going on, and then also in reality, just things that I had never experienced, and so it was fresh and new. And again, it was not the ministry context I was most familiar with, and so in that process of frustration, I had to learn three things. One, in order to shift the culture, I had to study the culture. I had to build relationships with those who were a part of our church, and to literally, as we've always heard, learn why certain things are the way that they are.
Right.
And so once I got a chance to study it, to understand some things that were kind of a part of our fabric and who we were, and to not shift that, but to lean in even harder as to how we can align all these principles with the Word of God. Right. What's our mission? What's our vision? What are our core values as a church? And so those were things we had to establish upon entering a very steeply rooted church. And so I had to study the culture, but then it was the development of strategy as to how do we implement the things that we know that God is leading our church to be. I'm really driven as it relates to community engagement. And so what does it look like to have a church in a community that offers nothing but Sunday worship to the community? And so how do we implement and what curriculum, what programming, what are things that we need to bring to the table that will help advance the work that God has called us to do? What innovation and creativity? I got here in 2012, and so we were already significantly behind a number of areas. And so in developing that strategy, it took understanding and identifying key leaders, being prayerful to God for areas that we may not have the giftings for in the congregation, that God was going to send it over time, and to be patient through it. If I had more time, I'd have to tell you about some of the Sundays that as I suffered and struggled, things musically were not quite where I wanted them to be, and I just sucked it up and sat through it for about 2 years. Just bite the bullet and keep pushing. Because you don't want to die on every mountain, and so we were able to study it. We were able to implement strategy, but then it's time for the shift after that. And so that shift is taking time to teach it. Anything we changed, we wanted to teach it first. This is why we're doing it. And what was helpful for me was when some of the older mothers in our church would say, come to our noonday Bible study, which was something we implemented for those who were retired. They would say, but Pastor, what we're doing is not what this verse says. And so they made the changes in Bible study. I didn't even have to make them. And so that was helpful. But teaching it, then training those leaders and transitioning, and dealing with the backlash that may come with the shift and the transition, but it's necessary. And I'll add this one last point. That was a frustration for me. That's what helped me birth this conference, and to put teaching tools, to have our learning cohort that we have with some amazing teachers from all over that we'll talk about later. But in addition to that, the shift that I experienced, I had to take a lot of backlash. I believe a lot of pastors have benefited from the pandemic because they were able to make some shifts into areas that perhaps they've been praying about for a long time,
Right.
But God ordained that some things would be structured differently during this time.
I mean,
and we
and
made it.
even if they weren't praying about it, thinking about it, wanting to do something, they were forced to do it. And they were forced to do it.
Yes, sir.
Which is a whole nother. So I'm gonna just bring up one that I think feels like it always is a sticking point, but like music. You talked about worship, culturally, like, right? A church that's been around for 120 plus years has probably been singing the same songs for a long time, and they're used to hearing those things, and they're used to
Go ahead and say it. They've been singing it for 122 years.
Maybe. I don't know how it changes if it goes like that would be pretty cool on one hand, right? Like I mean, the history behind that is amazing, but also like being relevant and being modern and attracting younger generations and things like that all also come to play, because the church is supposed to be reaching people. It's not meant to be, insular. So just talk to me about that. Like, how did you go about working through changing the worship, or has it changed significantly? Like, what was that? I know that's only one part of this, and it's actually not massively important in the grand scheme of things, but it's a big deal at the same time.
Yeah. So I guess the best way for me to answer it is I've always been a kind of a both and type of guy, not either or. And so in being both and, there are things about Brown Chapel and our context that that I know God is pleased with and that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to get rid of those.
Of course.
And number one, if any of them are watching, or if they watch watch a replay later, they can attest to the fact that we have a faithful, committed group that is always available. Then, as we have continued to grow, we had to embrace new concepts and new ideas, new direction as it relates to the style of worship. And so our church, I think, even through the preaching, has shifted over time. And so if you're ever with us here at Brown Chapel, we're a pretty fiery bunch here. But in the process, we wanted to marry those two worlds together. That doesn't happen in everybody's context. It's hard to blend the two worlds. But I believe that's one thing we were able to do. And to encourage some pastor or leader who may be watching, there may be some transitions that people will willingly embrace because they were waiting for somebody to change it.
Right.
And they're like, we just thought it was going to be this way all the time because nobody had the courage to stand up and to change it. And so, music, like you said, it's just one aspect of it. But you're going to get a wide array as it comes to the worship experience here. And I'll add to that. My dad was has been a community choir director for 40 years.
Wow.
And so I saw music. I play a few instruments as well, and so don't ask me to sing because other people have that gifting.
That's not you. Okay, I got you.
But my dad, and just kind of seeing his love for the church, from hymns, to gospel, contemporary Christian anthems. I was able to be exposed to music across the spectrum and be exposed to the need to connect community across denominational lines and across racial lines. And so to be able to have grown up in that experience really pushed us a little bit further when I started pastoring to say, I want to make sure our church can do the same.
Yeah, I love it. What kind of things have you done to engage with the community? Like you mentioned that as something that you were very passionate about and wanted the church to reflect that passion. What's something you've done, in your 8 or 9 years that has like brought that to fruition?
Well, there are things, of course, that I've done personally as, just myself and my wife, but there are things that our church as a whole that I'm grateful for that it has taken a hold of and is doing even when we are not giving leadership to it. And so We have a community team that we've built here at our church, which originally started as our outreach ministry. We moved to a more team concept during the pandemic to really try to keep people connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a community team, and they have been knocking it out of the park as it relates to providing food and clothing and other resources for homeless shelters here in this community.
Yeah.
They have also been doing the same. There was a need for masks as students return back to school, and so our church led an effort to make sure there were masks available to those students. But beyond that, there's a periodic. There's a gas station that's literally up the street from us. Unfortunately, it recently caught fire, and so it burned down.
Oh no.
So we're hopeful it'll be back up as people start returning to church, because that was always their stop for gas and breakfast on
Right.
their way to church.
Yeah.
But we would buy up all the gift cards in the gas station and literally just do a gas on God day and pay for gas for everybody that came through. And
Nice.
so we've always tried our best to be as creative as possible in how we leaned in to supporting the community, not just the mass piece, but we also adopted schools in our community as well. So whatever the needs are in 2 local elementary schools, one in Oconee County, where our church resides, and another in Clark County, which is where Athens is, that 15-minute drive.
Okay.
I've served on their boards for the schools as well to really make sure that our students have whatever they need. And so what one of the things that has been a huge encouragement to me is that when a passion of mine becomes the passion of the church. And so our church is engaged in some amazing ways. And I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's shift over to the conference, because all that stuff is the stuff that I think you're trying to, that's why you created this conference, is you want to help churches and church leaders, bring about these kind of changes in the culture and what the church is all about. So how is the conference, like you talked about how it was born, excuse me. But like, how is it resourcing local churches and kind of equipping them to bring about change in their congregation?
So what started as a conference that we originally in our first year just, hoped that it would help about 50 pastors in and around our community. We ended up with 74 our first year. And then again, our second year, we shifted to a more leadership team model, which would be whether that's paid staff or volunteer staff. But that they would identify key leaders that need to hear the same things that those pastors are hearing to make it easier for implementation in their churches. But what we're really treating this as is that I'm hopeful that churches will use this as their beginning of the year leadership retreat, because I find it hard to believe that you'll find more resources given to you than you'll find with us at the beginning of the year. So from a preaching perspective, we have sessions on preaching, developing your preaching, sermon preparation, preaching calendars, if you will. And then you're going to hear from some of the most amazing preachers as well in our keynote sessions, leadership development, leadership training, creativity, innovation, technology, developing irresistible youth ministries and children's ministries. And as I mentioned earlier about engagement as a church, engagement and activism in the community, making sure that your church is relevant to the community context in which it resides, how to manage church conflict. That's something we don't talk about often. But we've got some sessions that will be,
and there's plenty of it.
But we just got to own it, and accept it. But know that God can still use those difficult moments to still get glory from them. And so we're excited about being able to lean into that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, about pastoring in a rural context, we have a concept that we say often around here about breaking the rules, so to speak, that we want to kind of lose the mentality that that certain churches are country churches rather than the church that just happens to be in the country.
Right.
or family churches, which really says that there are a few dominant families, but in essence, is really a church family. We're trying to create a culture where we're all connected and we're all engaged, and so a lot of that will be helpful for churches. But what again started for pastors in a similar context to me has morphed into somewhat of a regional conference. So we're going to have pastors and churches from Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina with us here all throughout the state of Georgia this year in person. And then, of course, there's a virtual aspect to our conference as well for those who may be interested in that. But it's amazing to me to see some of the churches that are signing up that are not in the same context, but they understand the need for the resources and relationships that we're able to offer. And so that's more so on the teaching side. But then from a provider side, the amazing work that Tithely does with church management software, with app development, with mobile and electronic giving options. We want to be able to bring those options directly to those pastors. There's some leadership development that will be done. The Barnum Group is a partner with us. They've done a study on the state of the Black church that will come out in the first quarter of 2021. We're going to get a sneak peek at that study at our conference as well. And so we're excited about that, being a part of it. We also have an amazing sponsor, Aspen Group, that does facilities. And so they will be a part of our conference as well to really talk through, how did you manage through COVID and possibly repurposing space when we're doing ministry in this digital world now. And so, we're going to have some amazing conversations, amazing partners like you, and also some amazing classes and preaching and worship experiences. And whether you're in person or virtual, everybody's going to have access to the same thing. And so,
right. I mean, it'll be cool. So this is year 3, and you're adding virtual this year in the midst of COVID, naturally. But I think it'll be cool to see what happens with the conference by adding that component. I mean, I know a bunch of conferences that went completely virtual this year and had, record attendance, if you will, just because the access was so much easier. So, if you've got a few hundred in the room, you might have a few thousand watching virtually.
Yeah, it's amazing the doors that virtual opens up to us. And so even and I want to encourage a pastor who is probably still navigating through the pandemic. We were able to have a reach that we never would have had if we just remained in the four walls of our church. And so, and that's one of the things that, there's a lot of pushback. Well, we don't need all that technology. We're not making this investment in this. And so now people are saying you can't afford not to,
Right.
So we're excited about that.
Yeah. Are you going to do any track sessions on kind of doing church online and kind of what that looks like, how to get started, those kinds of things?
Absolutely. So we have a session called The Church Has Left the Building. And it's
Nice.
solely dealing with how to expand your digital footprint. And then we have a session called High Tech, High Touch, which is really embracing the hybrid model of needing to understand how to engage in ministry in the physical space, and the implementation of technology for that, and then also how to do so in the virtual world. I'll add this, something that we experienced in the middle of the pandemic as a church. The men of our church made a decision back in January that they wanted to pay to have, that they wanted to finance it. They didn't want anything to come from the church's budget. We're going to put screens up in the sanctuary. Our church never had screens before. And so we're going to take care of that. We're going to do it. And so we launched out in March and were able to get everything, to have everything for what we needed for the in-person experience. And then we stopped meeting. And so we made it a sizable investment. And then we couldn't utilize it. And so that meant that through the pandemic, through the summer months, our church then invested in what we needed to do from the virtual aspect. And early on, we had another local pastor who said, I'll make sure our media team will come record you to make sure people can get the messages.
Wow.
And so that was an amazing connection.
Yeah, that's cool.
That was made in our community between two sister churches here in the Athens area. But then it also, got the awareness of those who are part of our church to say, what pastor's been telling us all along, he's not as crazy as we think he is. It's time for us to do it. And so
that's cool.
I think a lot of pastors are going to have that same experience as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Pastor Richardo, this has been awesome. Where can folks go to just check out the conference and learn more about what's going on?
Sure. They can go to classiccityconference.com. And there they'll be able to find all of the sessions that will be offered, those who will be a part of our keynote experiences as well. It will, for those who are planning to be with us in person, it has all the hotel information. We'll be meeting at the University of Georgia Center for Continuing Education and Hotel. And so if you heard my statement about the Bulldogs earlier, just disregard that, because we're going to be on campus for our conference. And for those who will be with us virtually, all the information is there as well as to how you can take part and even virtually engage with our presenters and our partners there as well. And Frank, I want to offer this since we're together today. We had a Black Friday to Cyber Monday sale that went on. We had a deal that we offered. And although we're a day past that, because Tithely is a friend of the Classic City Conference, if you go to register today from watching this experience, once you've selected your courses, when you get ready to check out, just type friend in that in the discount code box, and you'll be able to get that same deal that was offered over the last few days.
I'm typing this in to everybody right now. Love it. Just put the link and the discount code out to the folks watching live. So super appreciate that. That's very generous of you.
Sure.
Good time.
We're grateful.
I mean, we're excited. Conferences at the beginning of January. If you guys are watching, definitely go check it out. Register. You can attend virtually. And I just think it's a cool, like everything you're doing, Pastor Richardo, like super cool. Excited about what you're doing at the local church there and how you're kind of taking all those learnings, putting them into a conference, bringing more leaders to kind of help boost that up and watch the conference grow. Super cool story. Thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me, Frank, and we applaud all the work that you, Dean, and the whole Tithely team are doing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We're having fun, man. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. There's a bunch of you watching live. So whether you caught us live or you catch the recording, great show today. Encourage you to watch the whole thing. Go check out classiccityconference.com, and we will be with you guys next week. Same time, same channel. Have a good weekend, everybody.